Hello, it's Patriotic Christian here. It's been quite a while since I did my last video, but I need to get started again. So today, I wanted to address an issue that I do hear occasionally where Christians would say something along the lines of, I'm not that interested in economic issues, just moral issues. You know, they apply this especially when it comes to voting and things like that. They're just, the whole debate over capitalism versus Marxism, they don't think it matters. It's like, well, as long as we have morality, it's fine. So here's my question for people thinking along those lines is, when God says, thou shalt not steal, is that a economic issue or is that a moral issue? Because the way I look at it is it's both. Because I don't believe you can separate economic issues and moral issues. They are interconnected in a lot of different ways. And so one of the ways I want to illustrate that is by simply reading some Bible verses. So I've got the ones I'll be referencing. Of course, there's a little bit more context to each one, but you'll see where I'm going with this. So I'm going to start with Leviticus, because that's the first one on the list here. Leviticus 19, 35 and 36 says, Ye shall do no unrighteousness in judgment, in metyard, in weight, or in measure. Just balances, just weights, a just ephah, and a just hin shall ye have. I am the Lord your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt. Now, of course, he was speaking to children of Israel at the time, more specifically to the priesthood and stuff. But these were basic rules for, conducting business, which I'll get into further. For now, let's go on to the next one. So this is going to be Proverbs 11:1. Says, a false balance is abomination to the Lord, but just weight is his delight. And then also in Proverbs 16:11, a just weight and balance are the Lord's. All the weights of the bag are his work. And then in Proverbs 20:23, divers weights are an abomination unto the Lord, and a false balance is not good. And then here we have Hosea 12:7. He is a merchant. The balances of deceit are in his hand. He loveth to oppress. Then here in Amos 8:5, we have, saying, when will the new moon be gone, that we may sell corn, and the Sabbath, that we may set forth wheat, making the ephah small and the shekel great, and falsifying the balances by deceit. And then here we have Micah 6:11. Shall I count them pure with the wicked balances and with the bag of deceitful weights? Now, all of these verses are kind of centered on a simple illustration from their day, which was, in a more broad sense, speaking about being honest in the way you conduct business. Now, for many of you, you might already be familiar with the references it's giving. It talks about balances an awful lot, and it talks about weights and things like this. So what I'm going to do is briefly explain the common practice of the day that it's referring to. So essentially what they did back then is they didn't always have a set currency like we do today, where we've got, dollars and pesos and yen and euros and whatnot, where you've got a designated currency with a specific value assigned to it, and people simply charge in that currency for whatever it is you're buying what is appropriate. Now, there was a time when things were not quite that well organized. So what people usually traded in would be silver and gold. That would be essentially the standard currency. And you could trade that in any society, any culture, because it was always considered valuable. And then you'd be trading other, basic goods, like it mentions, wheat and corn and barley or whatever. They would sell it by weight, and you would also purchase it by weight. So if they were selling, one ephah of barley for 1 shekel of silver, you would have to obviously use some sort of scale to determine the correct weight of barley, but also the correct weight of the silver. And so the way they did that was actually with a very simple device that would be described as a scale. But essentially, you'd have this bar along the top, and you'd have some way of attaching 2 opposing trays, and it would be balanced in the middle, which is where the word balance would come from. And ideally, these would all be equal in weight when they're empty, so it sits nice and straight. But once you apply weight, you put something in one tray, it's going to tip the scales, and it's going to be obviously heavier on one side because it won't be very straight. It's going to be leaning to that side. And so the way that they would conduct business, if they needed to pay 1 shekel of silver, for example, then you would put a known weight. You would have a set of weights that would be of known value or of known weight. You would put that on one side, and then you would apply the pieces of silver that you're trying to make equal 1 shekel. And if it's too heavy, then obviously it's too big. You might have to take a chunk off of it, or use 2 smaller pieces, or it got a little bit complicated there. So you didn't always have it exact, but you'd try to get it pretty close, because if this guy is expecting 1 shekel of silver and he has one shekel weight on here, and then you put your silver in there, and then this side is heavier, then he knows you're not giving him as much as it should be, right? Now, all of this is complicated enough, but it got even more complicated by dishonest business practices, because you would have, like you have here where God is talking about just weight and a just balance, right? Because there are many different ways that you can rig this. You could have your tray be too heavy or something. Might be a little easier to detect. But one of the things that they commonly did back then, or at least dishonest people would do, is they would have more than 1 set of weights. Because the way this scale works, it depends on you having the correct weight on one side in order to properly judge that you have the correct weight on this side. So if you have a set of weights where you got 1 shekel, 2 shekels, 5 shekels, etc., and you have this assortment of weights, some people would have more than 1 set. So they would have 1 set of weights where they're a little bit light, and then another set of weights that would be a little bit heavy. And what they would try to do is if they're selling something and they're expecting 1 shekel, then they would want to use their heavy set of weights, because that means that in order to make the scale balance, the person purchasing would have to put in a little bit more than 1 shekel in order to make the scale balance. And so by doing this, they're essentially overcharging their buyer. And this is dishonest, because the buyer doesn't necessarily know that they're being overcharged. It would be one thing if you were simply charging 1.5 shekels, but if you're just charging 1 shekel and they end up having to pay 1.5 shekels because your weights are off, intentionally so, then that's very dishonest. Then they would have a light set of weights, so that whenever they're going out to buy something, they would always try to use their light set of weights to balance the scale, because this means they're essentially underpaying. So it's a way of cheating. They're able to cheat someone when they sell something by using heavy weights and get more, and then they can cheat someone when they're buying by using lighter weights and actually pay less. So usually, it wouldn't typically be a whole 1/2 over, but small amounts over a long period of time can really add up. So this is one way that they would sort of cheat the system. And this is what God is talking about when he says, to use just weights. He's saying, like, make sure that the weights you're using are correct. They're the correct weight. And don't have multiple sets of weights. Don't be deceptive with it. Just use one set of correct weights for all the business you conduct, so it's always fair. Now, we all know that not everyone does that, so obviously disputes could arise from this entire system. I'm very appreciative that we no longer have to use this kind of complexity in our trading. We actually have currency, but there's some dishonesty with our currency as well, which certainly you can take these principles and apply it to pretty much anything. And that's what I'm here to do. Is I've read some scriptures on the subject, and I've explained what it's referring to. So now I'm going to get into how we would apply this, particularly in a government setting when it comes to economic systems and so on. So essentially what we have is any kind of society which is civilized is going to have a government, someone to sort of regulate and keep things, consistent, and also keep things fair and honest, hopefully. That's a government's job. But a government also provides things for people that people have a hard time providing for themselves. Like, for example, if you're the taxpayer here, you'd probably have government building roads. Why? Because it's a full-time job to build roads. You need to make your own living, and it's more convenient for you because you do have the right to make roads yourself, but it's a lot more convenient to just pay a small tax regularly, like for a gas tax, for example, and that money goes to building and maintaining roads. So it's a good deal. You benefit, and everybody else who pays benefits. And I think it's worth pointing out also that it's just to charge someone for services they're using. Like if you use electricity, the electric company is perfectly within their rights to charge you for your use of their product and service. Okay, that's how it works. And so it's perfectly just when a government charges you for the services and things that you benefit from. This is something that you agree to when you use the stuff, right? Anyway, what's not right is if you have another person over here who is still able to benefit from all these services, but they're paying nothing, right? They're either not contributing at all, or they're contributing a lot less than their fair share. That's not right. But also taxes go to other types of things, like for the military, for national defense. It's a lot harder for an individual to always defend their own borders and things like that. So it's helpful to have government do that. And of course, also we have police, which will help to protect your property from other individuals that might encroach on it. So we have this whole legal system, and of course courts, which can adjudicate disputes between people and make sure the law is applied correctly. And of course, any of these things is subject to be corrupted, which is coming back to what the Bible talks about, being just. So if a government is charging you a fair price for roads and a fair price for the military, police, and the courts, then there's not a problem, especially if it's charging you a fair price and it's applying things equally and fairly and justly. It's a whole different story if they're overcharging you and they're wasting money and they're not providing adequate services. Then that's an unjust system. Something is wrong and it should be fixed, right? But it can get even worse, because one of the things we have government for is to protect our property. This is why we have a military, to protect our property from foreign invaders. This is why we have a police, to protect our property from other individuals that might want to take it. And we have the courts, which in the case someone does actually take your property, you have a recourse of action that you can actually, get justice. So this is part of what government is supposed to do. But what we have today, in large part, is we've got a government which is overtaxing. So they're charging a lot more than would be just, because they're charging a lot more than they need to provide all these basic services. But it gets worse than that, because what they're doing is the government is actually giving things to some people by taking it from others. So they're taking from one person, giving to another. All this is institutionalized theft. It enables this person to steal from this person through government, by having the government take it for them and give it to them. So government takes it from this person, gives it to that person. Essentially, this person is stealing from this person. They're just using government to do it. And at the same time, a lot of times you have this person is not only stealing from this person through government and through taxes, but this person is not paying any taxes to fund all this stuff. So this guy is paying for all this stuff, right? He's paying for all of that. And in addition, he's being stolen from to fund this guy's laziness. This is unjust. And so when we talk about things like socialism, or we talk about tax rates and whether taxes are too high and what taxes should be spent on, these are not just economic issues, as some sort of brush it off as and be like, yeah, I don't really care about that, I just care about abortion. Now, you should care about the abortion issue, but issues like these are economic. But what I'm trying to point out is that economic issues are also moral issues. There's no separating the two. The Bible doesn't. I mean, I read just a few verses focusing mostly on honest business practices, but there are so many other things throughout the whole Bible that connect morality and economics. You know, like I mentioned in the beginning, thou shalt not steal. Is that a moral issue or is that an economic issue? The fact is it's both, because morality and economics go together. You either have a moral economic system or you have an immoral economic system. And so when Christians are fighting against an immoral economic system and fighting for a moral economic system, they're perfectly justified in doing that because they're being consistent with biblical principles and with Christian ethics. And we should, as Christians, want our government to be as good as we can get it. It's never going to be perfect. It never has been. It never will be until Jesus returns. But we should definitely strive for improvement. And we should fight against those who want to use government to do a lot of immoral things and to support immoral people in doing these immoral things. And even a government that isn't doing things overtly immoral, if they're just charging you too much for taxes, that by itself is immoral. If they're wasting money, if they're, like maybe Caltrans, they probably spend 3 times more than they need to get something done. That is immoral. Yes, it's economic, but that is also a moral issue. And we should care about that because Jesus cared about that when he overthrew the money changers in the temple. He saw economic activity that was immoral. And we should be just as enraged about this as Jesus was. So that's all I got for you today. I hope to catch you on the next video. Bye.